Thanks for tuning into the Football Talk Squadron. I'm Dutch.
And I'm Maul.
And we're bringing to you the NFC South offseason. A lot of different topics to discuss. But before we get in that, we haven't done in a while past and present of just a true past and present. So I'll give it up to you, Maul. Which would you like first, past or present?
Let's do present.
Present. This is a little, I will say he's a free agent. So he's trying to sign. He just hasn't yet. Came out of Stanford. Played for the Packers, the Ravens, the Jets, the Saints.
Wait. This feels like past.
No, this past year he was with the Patriots. So he is a present player, but he is a free agent right now. He hasn't signed with a new team.
Okay, so say it again. Stanford,
drafted by Green Bay, played for the Ravens, the Jets, the Saints, and the Patriots.
Oh, goodness. Stanford.
Draft year was 2015. Now, what I'll tell you about this guy, and this is sort of a bigger...
Offensive?
It is offensive. And if you want a bigger hint...
J.J. Arcega-Whiteside?
No. This guy is a running back, but I would also put him in the category of he has worn wide receiver numbers. He's sort of a mix.
Stanford. The only couple guys, running backs, let's see. It's obviously not CMC. There's Bryce Love.
This guy, while he was at Green Bay, had a really, really good mix with Aaron Rodgers. It was like he was carrying the ball. He was catching the ball. He was doing a little bit. He was like a Swiss Army knife. And he's been around the league, and he's never really replicated what he was at Green Bay, in my opinion.
Oof. Ty Montgomery?
It is Ty Montgomery.
There we go.
So that was a little bit of a tricky one. I didn't know he went to Stanford.
I didn't either.
I don't remember him playing there.
I was gonna say, did he play running back at Stanford?
Yeah, let me take a look. His college career wore 88 his first two seasons. Junior season, he contributed on offensive special teams. He was mainly a kick return guy.
That's what I was gonna say. I was thinking he was gonna be like special teams or like random wide receiver stuff because I don't remember him as a running back at Stanford.
He got taken in 2015. I feel like that was around the time that Bryce Love came out, or at least was there at Stanford.
Maybe
I'm wrong. All right. So that was your present, your past. Since we're in the NFC South, hopefully you remember who this guy is. Running back for the Atlanta Falcons, Michael Turner. If you remember him.
I do remember him.
And if you need a hint, just think of Pops' home state. And let's go bigger hint then. A bigger hint is before, this was during the BCS era. I'm not sure if you remember this. This school got a New Year's Day bowl game and got obliterated.
This year they did?
No, this was back in the BCS era.
Oh.
Before CFP, they got a BCS, not like a New Year's Six bowl game. I forget who they played. I can look that up real quick. But they got torched during that. But it was one of the, they went to the Orange Bowl in 2013.
Pops' home state, like where he lives or like who he roots for?
Where he's from.
Gosh.
So you know it's Illinois, something.
I mean,
it's Northern Illinois.
Northern Illinois?
Yeah.
NIU? The Huskies?
Huskies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
I forget what I have to go find it, but I remember they played in that. I think it was the Orange Bowl. I can take a look real quick. In 2013, I think they said it was.
Are they even a like FBS school?
They lost to Florida State 31-10. I don't think they are. They may be in like the Sun Belt or something. They're in the Mid-American Conference, so yeah, trash. Yeah, that's the type of games that you go to and they give you like a free bowl of soup for showing up to the game.
Bowl of soup.
There's just nothing else to like entice you, which I mean, that's pretty much what the Panthers were doing. I remember last year, since we're talking about the NFC South, it was the closest that I got to go into a game last year, and it was solely because tickets in the upper deck would go. No, they're going for a quarter. A quarter. It was like that monsoon game.
Yeah,
and
all wasn't the weather terrible?
Yeah. And that you just had to watch Bryce Young get thrown around like that. Remember in Tropic Thunder where he just throws that baby off the bridge?
Yeah.
That's what Bryce Young's entire season was like last year behind that offensive line. And I guess that's a good, start from the bottom with the Panthers. I think the Panthers last season and this season could be summed up with the fact that they yet again have the number 1 overall pick, but they gave it away for something that turned out to probably be not worth it, in my opinion.
And over the last 2 seasons have given up their 2 best players. Like the only people who were producing any type of offense gave up those 2 guys and all their picks. And they got nothing to show for it.
And they gave up the defensive guy this year. I didn't know it, but Brian Burns, the Rams had offered 2 first-round picks last year, and I think it was like either a player or a 3rd round or something, and the Panthers told him no. Well, they just gave him up for a 3rd round pick now to the Giants.
Yeah. That's you've seen all the conspiracy theories that Tepper is purposely tanking them for some reason. You haven't seen that? There's all these conspiracy theories that he's doing it intentionally. And
well, I'm really curious now. Is this him and the old owner had some business deal beef, and now he's you know what, your team's gonna suck forever?
Yeah, I don't know the motivation behind it, but there's a bunch of things out there that he is just, he's just the worst thing that's ever happened to the Panthers organization.
I will say he's super vindictive. I know that you may not have followed this. I only caught wind of it because I watched too many videos about football. He was building this huge Panthers complex, and it got a quarter of the way done. Well, they didn't give him the tax credit and stuff, the other funding that he wanted. And so he was just canceled. And so it's this half, it's significant. There was no drywall or anything, but the concrete structure, millions of dollars have been poured into this. And he's just yep, we're not doing that anymore. Wow. Which he to me is the new Jerry Jones. It's just hey, you have a guy that has billions and billions of dollars, and then you gave him a football team, and now he's just
running it into the ground.
Yeah. Which I feel bad because the person that's really going to get run into the ground is Bryce Young.
Yeah, he's going to end up falling into the Browns/Jets type of QBs where it's he maybe possibly could have done something better in the league with his career, but he's going to just play for this trash organization, and he's going to end up either getting hurt or just get so burnt out on being murdered every single game that his career is just going to fold, and he's just going to be just another statistic later down the road. And you talked about, they added 2 guards. I hadn't heard of either one, so not that I'm super savvy on offensive linemen, but if you look at their off-season work, really all they gave him was Deontay Johnson. That's really the only name that stands out as far as they're helping him out, which maybe takes a little heat off of Adam Thielen, but Adam Thielen is he's just getting up there in age. He can still ball, but even Deontay Johnson, he's not gonna be a game breaker in any stretch of the imagination. He's just a name that people know, but they have so many issues that like they've added some and lost some, but like nothing I think is really significant. They're just going to be the same terrible number 32 team like they were last year.
Yeah. And I mean, it's sad because I wouldn't be surprised if after a year Carolina's looking at firing another coach. Like that's sort of where the Panthers are to me. Is it's just sort of they want instant results, but I know during the season they were like, we want a number one wide receiver, and it was like, well, what picks do you have to do for that? And they're like, well, we don't have that, and it's like, well, then you ain't get one.
Yeah, I
Like,
mean, usually when they have these teams that are in these like terrible dumpster fire situations, usually they have some hope of like, well, you played terrible, so at least you get a good draft pick, right? Like, and they don't even have that. I mean, like they just usually, there's usually some type of reciprocation as far as like how bad or good your season went with how your draft will go, or like maybe the what you got for those picks kind of thing. But like they just got nothing. They don't have draft picks, they don't have people to even trade around. Like they just got nothing.
and I think when you look at compare from the Bears to the Panthers perspective, like regardless of how Caleb Williams turns out, it's clear that them trading away DJ Moore killed the Panthers. Like they would have loved to have had some type of wide receiver. I mean, like you said, Thielen did a great job for what he accomplished at Carolina, but by no means should Thielen be your number one guy. Like
No.
he's, I mean, when Stephon Diggs left Minnesota, he was the number one, and even then, when he was at full health, like healthy and like prime Adam Thielen, it was still like, yeah, he's not the number one guy. That's why they went out and got JJ. It's one of those scenarios for the Panthers that you look at their draft and the picks they have, it's like you better hope you hit in the later rounds like some diamond in the rough because it's going to be a long season.
I mean, just think about like within the last couple seasons, they've had a number one pick, Christian McCaffrey, and DJ Moore. Like that on any other team, you're like, dude, we've got something going for us. You know what I mean? And like, what do they got nothing for Christian McCaffrey, nothing for DJ Moore. They've traded away their number one pick, and they've got Bryce Young. I mean, like Bryce Young was the only thing that was decent out of that entire pickup, but you gave away Christian McCaffrey, DJ Moore, and another first round draft pick to get it, and you're still terrible. Like that just goes to show you how bad the organization is right now.
Yeah. And where I think the Panthers could fall into a deeper hole, we'll see if they do it this year, is I can see them being dumb enough to be like, well, we'll trade our first round pick next year for something this year. And it's like, I got a feeling that you're probably still going to be dragging the bottom of the league next year. You're probably going to be competing for a number one pick. And at least you can either pick the offensive lineman that you want to protect him or trade back and get multiple guys, but they need a ton of help. And they didn't. That was sort of the surprising thing for me is like you had some wide receivers and not a plethora, but like Mike Evans was there. Like I'm surprised that you didn't hear the Panthers being like, we'll pay you $120 million. Like, we just got to have somebody. Like, to reach on someone to come in there, they didn't do that. Like,
yeah. And again, what's probably going to end up happening is they're going to be at the bottom of the barrel next year. They're going to be fed up with the way Bryce Young is playing because he's got nothing for him, and they're probably going to get some other quarterback, which at this point, I don't know who's going to be coming out that's going to be worth the number one pick from a quarterback perspective, but it's not going to help because it doesn't matter who you have. You're not surrounding, when we've talked about this ad nauseum, as far as, you're going to send some guy to a trash organization. He's just going to be Bryce Young all over again.
it's sad, but it's true. It's true. For me, looking at the Panthers, like the other side of this is we haven't even touched on, like, who's on defense. Like I sit back and I look at that. It's like you get rid of Brian Burns, who a lot of people viewed as the best player on that team. Period. For really no one. You like you said, they bring in Deontay Johnson. I'm taking a look. They go out and sign Ashawn Robson. I know he was an Alabama guy. Then the one that gets me laughing, because I know we were trashing him a few weeks ago in the Texas, they go out and they sign Javanian Clowney. And I saw him say something like, "I'm really pumped to like really give it all in my hometown state." And I was like, "That is a man who." And I look in 2 years, $20 million, worth up to 24. I guarantee you, he'll do whatever it takes to probably hit his incentives. And after that, it's like that man's not going to be anywhere to be found in big games. But
Or they're going to overpay him, and it's going to hurt him in the long run anyway.
yeah, so I just sit back and look at it and I go, for the Panthers, like, get ready to be bottom. I know I will not make that mistake again this year when we do our preview episode of where we think everyone's going to happen. You can go ahead and mark it down. Panthers bottom of the NFC South.
Yeah, bottom of the league.
Yeah. So for you, I know you're probably sitting similar. Who do you have next, sort of towards the bottom of the division between the Saints, Bucks, and Falcons?
To me, it's the Saints as probably the number 3. I think you can say the Falcons and the Bucks have some hope as far as kind of battling for the division. I don't think the Saints have made that many offseason pickups, or moves that are going to compete for winning the division. Now, that being said, we talked about the AFC South last time. I feel like the NFC South is kind of typically in the same position where, like, you don't have to be super great and win a lot of games to be competing. And this last year proved it, and I think it's going to be the same going forward as this next year. Is like, if you're just kind of hanging around 500 for most of the season, you're probably going to end up with a shot somehow at the division by the end of the season.
Yeah. I look back at what you said about Derek Carr at the beginning when it was pretty much a swap for Jimmy G, and it's like it's the same person. And
Yeah,
for me, he's below average. Like it's not even a mid quarterback. Like at no point when you have the lead am I like Derek Carr is going to keep the lead, and at no point when you're losing I'm like Derek Carr is going to go get this win. Like neither is true. I sort of thought about it the other day. I don't know if you like this comparison or not. Who's more and more reminding me of Derek Carr is Tua. Like, it's a guy that I feel like has all this hype every single, like, this is the year. He's got all these pieces. Here we go. And then, like, every time that there's like the time for them to win, like, I think of Miami last year. They play Buffalo at home. Here's your chance to win the division. Like, just win a game down the stretch. Can't do it. Go to the Chiefs. Like, Tua's. And then Tua, every once in a while, he'll just throw one of those balls that looks like a duck that's been shot. Like, doesn't even make it to the wide receiver. And you're just, everyone's sort of standing there like, hey, what was that? Like,
yeah, that guy's a professional.
Yeah.
I mean, like, he's clearly talented in some regards. Like, he'll have games where you're like, yes, like, that's the guy that everybody thinks you should be all the time. But there's just such a wide range of, I mean, like, so bad. And then, like, decently. I won't ever say he's, like, really, really that good. But, like, he has games where you're like, that was a good throw, or like that was a good game. Like where's that been this whole time? And then again, he'll turn around and have a game with like 4 picks, and you're like, yeah, I guess that's kind of just who you are.
Are you talking about Tua or Derek Carr?
Insert either one. I mean, it's the same.
Exactly.
Like, it's a great comparison.
For me, the other thing about the Saints that was sort of surprising is how far Kamara's fell off. Just sort of like from his level of dominance that he had for that stretch.
Yeah.
Now I get that was under Sean Payton and Drew Brees. Just that offense was, you have Brees, so it makes it flow seamlessly. And ever since he left the building, it's been like, hey man, it's not the same offensive production that you're used to coming out of New Orleans.
Yeah, he's great in fantasy purposes because I feel like Derek Carr just can't throw the ball down the field confidently. So, I mean, he's just always looking to just drop the ball off to Kamara. So, from like a PPR standpoint or whatever, yeah, Kamara is still a home run pick because he's going to touch the ball so many times during that game. But you're right, from like an actual taking over a game and being that like game changer, that offense is just, there's no threat anywhere. Like Kamara is really the only threat, and if the defense can focus on him, then there's no other threat. I mean, Michael Thomas is gone now, which he was the only one that had a name that was worthy of anything. But over the last few seasons, he's never staying healthy. He's not really producing. So he's gone now. So, they've improved a little bit on the defensive side of the ball, but their defense wasn't really the problem. Their defense was already okay. Now they're getting better, so that'll help. But again, unless Derek Carr can protect the football and put up points on the other side, I mean, they're going to be again. I could be wrong. Their defense could keep them in just enough games where they can make 500 and somehow be close to the division. But I just think the Falcons and Bucks have made enough pickups moves in the offseason that the Bucks stay on top and the Falcons challenge them.
Yeah, it's funny that we were comparing players and you bring up defense because the player that I compare Clowney to is Chase Young.
Yeah.
Like highly, highly touted, supposed to be just this revolutionary, game-changing Hall of Fame type of defensive end. That's sort of what, generational talent that they like to throw around coming out of the draft. And I think that Chase Young's going to be exactly what Clowney is. He'll always have a place on a team because I think he's good enough that he's not a liability, but he's never been great enough that you're like, man, keep him on the team that he's on.
He's not going to take over a game like a J.J. Watt or an Aaron Donald. And he's supposed to be that guy. He never can be that guy. So it's perfect. You said it perfectly. I mean, he's going to start. He's going to be on the team. They're probably going to overpay him, but he's just he's not a liability. That's the nicest thing you can say about him is he'll do fine, but he's not going to all of a sudden your defense is stacked.
Yeah.
They added Willie Gay. That helps from the linebacker position. But again, I feel that's we've talked about this, the rich get richer, the poor get poor. Willie Gay is good, but it's kind of like he's maybe getting past his prime, and you're happy to have him, but you're not getting prime Willie Gay, right? These teams that are kind of mid, they're just happy to take other people's leftovers. And it usually ends up biting them because they're taking the name and paying the name, but they're not getting that name's talent, right? The team that already had him is already used up that talent, a little bit. And they're starting the downside of their career. And these teams will pay just to have some glimmer of a name on that side of the ball. And, they end up kind of hurting themselves in the long run because they're going to pay somebody who's not going to give them the production that they're paying them for.
That really sums up Michael Thomas's career with the Saints, which I don't want to throw the Saints under the bus for paying him initially because for that period of time when he was with Drew Brees those first few years, it was he was unstoppable. You knew where the ball was going. He was catching 100 catches a year.
Yeah, and you still couldn't stop it.
Yeah, and then he got paid, and it was he couldn't make it past week 3 without being hurt, and then it just seemed like he didn't care.
I mean, I think the season he broke the record was his last good season. After that, he's been essentially non-existent since that season.
Yeah, he is literally someone's going to overreach for him in fantasy, and that's the only reason his name stayed relevant. It's just from fantasy football where I sit back and I'm like, ooh, well, maybe I'll get to see the resurgence, and then it was a year or two ago, someone sent out some what's going to happen every single week. And I was week 2, Mike Thomas, IR. That any of those jokes always make me laugh from that perspective. I agree. I think what you're talking about, this getting richer, that's sort of where I see the Bucks and especially the Falcons go out and get Kirk Cousins. The Saints really didn't change from last year. The Saints competed in the division, but at no point would you sit back and be like, "Ooh, the Saints made major improvements." And I'd almost I'd probably give the same to the Bucks. The Bucks lost some pieces.
Dude, defensive,
yes,
to let go of Devin White and Shaq Barrett in the same season, that's the one thing that I think is scary for the Bucks because it's yeah, you brought back Mike Evans, which was a shock to everybody, but good for him, good on him for doing that. And then they paid Baker. I think they overpaid Baker, but that's a different discussion. at least they've still got Baker. But to lose basically your two, I mean, best players on that defensive side of the ball, like those two dudes arguably could have been, competed for like the two best linebackers in the league. You know what I mean? From like the best pair of linebackers, and you lose both of them in the same season, like that's going to create a huge hole, no pun intended, in that defensive side of the ball. And like, we know what Baker and Mike Evans are, and like they're good, but like you need some defense because Baker and Mike Evans are not going to solely win you games.
Yeah, and it showed against stiffer talent in the NFC. Now, I will say that they put up a good fight against the Lions last year in the divisional round, but from the standpoint of how much improvement have you seen in the team? Yeah, I'd be in the same boat. Like defensively, there's some major questions. It's like I hope you address it in the draft because there's some major weaknesses. There's some guys out there in the draft, linebacker wise, and other things that you can go get. But from that perspective, also, I look at the offense. Everyone on the team's getting older. Like Chris Godwin, Mike Evans getting older. I agree with paying Baker from the standpoint of unless you were going to go out and sign like Kirk Cousins or someone else, like a big name, you might as well pay the dude because reaching for someone like Bo Nix or somebody in the draft, like I just sit back and go, I'd rather Baker didn't play bad last year. He played well.
No, I agree. Like, and again, maybe I said it wrong. Like, I'm glad they paid Baker because they need, like you said, they weren't going to get anybody else. Baker is their best option at the point. I think they overpaid for Baker though. Like they didn't. What did he get? Like $300 million for the next 3 years, or I don't remember what it's something outrageous.
3-year, $100 million deal that includes $30 million fully guaranteed and has a max value of $115 million if he hits some incentives.
And again, this is going to sound like I don't think Baker's a good talent. I think we've talked about this enough that like Baker is good and they should have paid him. I think they just paid him too much because we've talked about this as well. As like when you pay too much for one position, now you can't. That could have probably. I mean, I don't know why, but that could have led to the reason why they got rid of Shaq Barrett and
Devin White.
You know what I mean? Like because you can't pay everybody, right? So like. I don't know. We'll see how it works out. I still think they're competing for the division, against the Falcons, but they've got some questions on the defensive side now.
I think the thing with paying Baker is I feel like every year we're now talking about like what the new quarterback's worth, and that's sort of like it seems to be an ever growing. I feel like at some point we're going to hit this like cap, for the lack of better words, of what a quarterback's worth, because it just seems like every year it's like, hey, the new next highest paid quarterback in the NFL history. And I felt like back in the day it was like Favre would sign a deal, then like 3 years later Manning would sign a deal. But it seems like everyone, like if they have their guy or even think that they have their guys, sort of like Daniel Jones last year, it's like we're just going to pay him what the market rate goes. It's like we're going to pay him what they're paying Mahomes, but we don't have Mahomes. And that to me like blows my mind that like teams won't just sit back and be like, hey, you're not worth, $30 million a year. You're worth 20, maybe, like compared to what everyone else is paying, but you're not worth, like you said, what they're paying him to come back next season.
Yeah.
So, and like you said, it really digs a hole for teams in the long run with building, which sort of brings us to our last team of the Falcons. I think they make the biggest signing offensive wise of the offseason with Kirk Cousins.
I was going to say it because they got rid of Desmond Ridder, but
I thought he was their guy.
But
they said that last year. He was their guy. For me, and I know you were the same boat from last season, every single week we were like, they don't have a quarterback. Like, team's a good team. Like, they competed in a lot of games. They were there It was just the fact that they didn't have a quarterback. And for me, it reminded me a lot of the AFC Jets. Like, hey, they have a lot of pieces. They just don't have a quarterback. Quarterback is losing them games, and that's what it was for the Falcons. If they can Kirk, I think that we dogged him so much before the beginning of last year, but before he got hurt, Kirk was playing really well.
He's always played well. Like, I don't have all of his stats in front of me, but like, Kirk gets a lot of grief for some reason. But like, there's so many times where you would clown Kirk, but then turn around and look at another team's quarterback and be like, well, he's actually outperforming them. Like, and this is when we talked about it, when we said franchise QBs, right? And you were like, you don't have Kirk. It's probably like a 80-20 split of like 80% is probably going to say Kirk is not a franchise QB. But to me, Kirk is that guy that, like, yes, he's not Patrick Mahomes. We know that, right? Like, we he's not that guy. But it's like Shanahan with the 49ers. Like, who else can you go get? Like, are you really going to get someone that's that much better than Kirk? Like, Kirk's not going to be your problem. Yes, he had his prime time jokes and all that other stuff, but like, you think about all the things that Kirk has accomplished over his years. Like, he's a fine quarterback, and we'll see how he recovers from the injury. I think that's going to be his biggest thing. I also question the weapons that he has. I think Bijan is solid. I don't think anybody's questioning Bijan. Drake London is good. I'm a fan because he went to USC. And Kyle Pitts is good. However, I think they may not be as good as everybody expects them to be, simply for the fact that, like, have they ever really produced a strong season? The answer is no. They've done fine, but like, they've always had the excuse of relying on, like, they've just never had a good quarterback, right? Like, that's always been like, Kyle Pitts gets drafted in fantasy way too high every year because he's supposed to be this like amazing talent because he was so good at Florida. But he's yet to really ever produce anything close to where he's being drafted. And again, he's had the excuse of like, well, he's got Desmond Ridder throwing him the ball. So we'll see. That's my I feel like this is like setting up where we could get fooled. I'm right there on the fool me wagon of like, I think the Falcons have made the best acquisitions. I think they're going to be the clear number one for that division. We'll revisit this at the end of the season, and I'm taking both sides here, so I get it. But like, I don't want to say I told you so, where if all of a sudden they come out and they're just not producing because finally they got a quarterback, but maybe Kirk's coming off the injury and he's just never really been able to do what he's doing. And then Kyle Pitts and Drake London have the same mediocre seasons that they've had. And it's just going to feel like a big letdown. Does that make sense?
Well, I'm going to add fuel to your fire from the standpoint of, I think it could be a potential huge letdown because you look at who he played with last year. Like, he doesn't have Justin Jefferson on this team. Like, I think Addison's better than Drake London. And then TJ Hawkinson's always performed way better than Kyle Pitts has over the course of his career. Like, when you look at
great points,
like from that, I haven't really, you're the first person I've really heard bring that point up. And I'm sort of sitting here and I'm like, you're not wrong. And then the other thing that I also sit back as I go, man, I know the Falcons have done this in the past. Now, thinking about it this way, I would not be shocked if the Falcons take a top tiered wide receiver with their draft pick. I know a lot of people
they need it.
They need it. Like, if Neighbors is there, if Adunas is there, Adunze, sorry.
Rome. I don't know how to say his last name either, but it's Rome.
Leave it up to me to try to pronounce the last name. That's
or anything.
Yeah, thanks for helping me out there, Chief. I mean, outside of, I don't think Harrison Jr. is going to ever fall that far down. The only way they could go get, it's just not going to happen. But I can see another top tier wide receiver going. I mean, they go out and they get Ray McLeod and Darnell Mooney to sort of help, I would say, help the slot,
They got
wide receiver.
Rondell Moore as well. He's probably their best pickup from. But again, it's like it seems like they're making all these moves, and it seems like they've got all these pieces, but nobody is really like, other than Bijan. I think Bijan's the only one that's like, dude, if they can build the offense around him, they're gonna have a much better time than they did this last year. Everybody else, though, it's kind of like, is Rondell Moore good? Sure, but like, am I really that excited about Rondell Moore? Same thing with Drake London. Like, Drake London is good, but if he's your number one and supposed to be like your best, you're like, oh, like, do you really feel that confident? Like, no. So that, and all that being said, like, I don't know what they're doing on the defensive side of the ball either. Like, it's not like they had a super stout defense. They're not making a ton of acquisitions there either. So like, I want them to be good, and I think they will. I'm just not going to be surprised if it feels like this big letdown of, it's the Falcons too. Like,
The reason that this is also triggering my mind to they may make a shocking move in the draft. So their head coach, Rasheem Morris, the last time he was a head coach was of the Falcons. And the last time he was head coach, they traded up and they got Julio Jones. So it wouldn't shock me. That's sort of I guess a better way for me to sum this up with their head coach. That was like one of the biggest disappointments for me, was re-signing a guy that you had already fired. Like,
especially when Bill Belichick was in the mix. Like,
yes.
I remember hearing like it was basically a done deal. They just had to like work through a couple of negotiations.
And from my understanding, Arthur Smith, pretty much it was stated through, I don't know if it was official sources, but it was like they didn't want Bill Belichick to come up there and disrupt the front office, which all I could sit back and go, hey, the last time you were in a Super Bowl, you lost a 25-point lead to who? I don't care. The front office hasn't done anything for you. Like,
those dudes aren't out on the field.
Yeah. They're not winning games. They haven't been winning games. They're not, as bad as the NFC South has been. The Falcons aren't sitting there like the Patriots were for decades, just beating the snot out of everyone in the AFC East. Like,
that's kind of my thing. It's like, you've had this division that's been weak for a while, and nobody can dominate. So like, I think the Falcons have the pieces coming together, but like, they've clearly shown that they don't have whatever it is, either from the front office or whatever, to like get to that dominating stance. And like, they're gonna find a way to somehow screw it up or keep it way too close.
Now you say this, like, I'm sit back and I'm like, man, I can easily see I think we said this about a few divisions last year. Like, I can easily see the Falcons being first. I can easily see them being third, like, in the division.
Same. I could as well.
It's just one of those ones that you sort of sit back and you're just like, Again, especially now that I think about what the Vikings had on offense.
Yeah. Like, personally, I hope it doesn't happen, because I do like Kirk, and if they end up third, Kirk is just going to take so much heat. And I think he's a good enough quarterback and obviously a really good guy that I don't think he deserves that. So I hope it doesn't happen. But I already see the headlines of like, if they end up third in that weak division with all these so-called weapons, like, it's over for Kirk.
You want to know a absolutely crazy stat I saw the other day about Kirk Cousins? In his NFL career, he has made more money off of his contracts than Tom Brady. Wow. Is that not wild? Like, that, I feel like that is sort of where I sit back and I'm just like, I think it's like, we have a problem here. Like, when you throw out stats, like, I get if it was like we're talking about like Bart Starr. It's like, yeah, the dude had to bag groceries during the summer to make it because the NFL wasn't paying anything. But like, the GOAT just retired like 2 seasons ago. So
yeah,
it's not that recent. And the fact that Kirk Cousins, since he's in, I think Kirk came in the league like 2007, 2008.
Sounds right.
Time frame. Like, Brady had a 7-year head start and already won a few Super Bowls, and Kurt still outpaced him with money. I sit back and I go, we'll find out, because they paid him 4 years, $180 million contract. Like, it's $50 million signing bonus, $100 million guaranteed, $90 million in 2024 and 25, another $10 million in 26. So they're paying him $90 million this year to win football games. Like, if they win 9 games, it's $10 million a win.
Which,
Like,
it's not Kirk's fault, right? Again, this is just like bad organizations will do bad things. But at the same time, like, at least like, Kirk has proven every single day of his life that it doesn't matter how much he's getting paid. He's going out and he's giving it his all, right? So, like, at least they don't have to worry about
he's not
that.
a liability.
Yeah. You don't have to worry about that side from Kirk. So, again, I hope they at least compete. I think they should win the division. I think really their only true threat is going to be Tampa, but Tampa's got some defensive questions. I think the Saints are like a clear third, could maybe sneak into second somehow, and then I think there's 7 layers of dirt, and then the Panthers.
Yeah, and that's also where Bryce Young's buried at the end. Sorry, I'm going to keep going back to that. I just remember there was a play last season that Bryce snapped the ball, and every single offensive lineman missed their blocks, and he got sacked by 4 different guys at once. And I was just like, I'm sorry, if that had been me, I'd been like, yo, timeout, I'm out. Like, yeah. I would have pulled Vontae Davis and just been like, I'm retiring at halftime.
Yeah, rip, dude, rip.
I mean, I guess we talk about a little current news before we sign off, since this is going to go up later today. The Rashid Rice pulling a Henry Ruggs. It's like, I don't know what it is with giving a 20-year-old $100 million, but this is what you get. And it's vehicular manslaughter almost. At least he didn't actually kill anyone, but dude, he's going to jail. Like, he's not playing football this year. Like,
it's unfortunate. I mean, we talked about there's so many variables involved, but without getting too political or anything on this, it's I mean, what do you expect? Like, it's not, you can't say it's not his fault, because it's 100% his fault. You don't know whether it's like upbringing or whatever the case is. It's just like these dudes have been able to do so many things in their life kind of without consequences because they're good at football, and you and I probably experienced a little bit of that, growing up at high school, maybe kind of getting into college, where like you got a little bit of preferential treatment, but we were nowhere near the talents that these guys have, and all of a sudden they get to this point where now they have so much money, they don't know what to do with it. And it's really unfortunate when you see these things happen, because even if he's able to come out, like your career is essentially over. I mean, like it's really hard to come back and do anything after that. You know what I mean? It's right when it was getting started to, right when he was getting himself a name in order to get paid.
Yeah. I sit back and I'm not giving him any type of leniency. It's more of me saying, hey, when I was 20 years old, I did some really stupid stuff.
Oh, yeah. And imagine if you had $200 million to do that stupid stuff with.
The only reason I didn't race a Corvette down the interstate at 120 miles an hour because I couldn't afford a Corvette.
Didn't get enough money to have one. Now, that's kind of what I'm saying.
I had a Toyota Highlander that made it sound like a weed eater when it got up to speed.
Yeah, and it's not like give them a break. They still are held responsible, but it's almost like God, what did you expect was going to happen?
Yeah, it's unfortunate, but at the same time, it's on the opposite end. You also sit back and you go, hindsight's always 20/20. I'm sure he sits back and is looking at it like, dude, that was so stupid. Like, why did I do it? And it's just like, well, it's done now.
Well, and you could also make the argument like there's, however many 500 other guys in the league that are also getting paid relatively similar to you that aren't doing stuff like that. So, at the end of the day, like it's sad, and you don't, you're not like wishing ill on the guy, but sorry, man, you made a huge, terrible mistake, and you got to pay for it now.
Last thing before we wrap it up, I know it was a big point of discussion. I can't remember if we really talked about it that much of the text, but I was going to get your thoughts on it. The hip tackle ban. What do you think is the fallout? What's your thoughts on the ban?
I get why they did it, but it's so. I watched the video that they like sent out to the owners or whatever, and they like showed. There were a few that you were like, yeah, that looked dangerous. But at the same time, this is like the whole like targeting. These dudes are moving at speeds that we can't comprehend and trying to tackle some guy that's got more momentum than a freight train. And you're expecting him to like what? Like pick him up and rock him down to the ground? You know what I mean? Like there's going to be so many tackles that are like, well, does that fit the definition of a hip drop? Yeah, every single tackle in history would fit the definition of a hip drop tackle. You know what I mean? Like, oh, you used your body weight to swing that other guy to the ground. I'm sorry, that's also the definition of just a tackle. You know what I mean? Like, so I hate it from the standpoint of they continue to make the defensive side of the ball impossible to play. Can't hit the guy low, can't hit the guy high, can't hit the guy low, can't wrap around his waist, and you got to get Travis Kelce to the ground, running 30 miles an hour down the field. Good luck. I mean, like, what are you supposed to do?
I really think it's going to start going. And correct me if I'm wrong. I know you can't hit the quarterback low, but like if you just take out Travis Kelce's around his knees areas, I don't think there's a flag for that. And I honestly, I think that this is going to be the response to this. Like, not intentionally trying to hurt guys, but it's like, dude, if you're coming at a dude from an angle, like, where else are you going to hit him? Like, how are you supposed to take Derrick Henry down?
You can't. The only thing that you can do, and this is again, it's like one of those, they're trying to be safe, but at the same time, if you can't wrap the guy up and tackle him to the ground, the only way to do it is to just like run as fast as you can and bullet towards the guy and hit him and hope he falls down. You know what I mean? Like, there's going to be zero form tackling. So it's tough to be a defensive player. There's going to be 100 more missed tackles or stupid penalties that like extend drives. Like, I can already see the Chiefs like 4th and 25, and they get like 5 yards on a little screen pass or something, and then they get a 15-yard penalty, hip drop tackle, and now it's a first down again, and everybody's going to lose their mind because the Chiefs have the refs in their pocket. Like, I can see it happening already. Like, or there's going to be zero form tackling. Everybody's just going to be colliding into each other like a bunch of pinballs and hoping the guy falls down, because you can't hit him high and you can't wrap up. Like, it literally prevents you from wrapping up.
Yeah. I don't like the rule from the standpoint of, and I know JJ, a lot of defensive guys came out and were like, yo, we're getting to the point that just ties some flags on them. Like, from the standpoint of what you said earlier of, it's already an offensive league. Like, it's already hard enough to play defense, and now you made it harder. I get that guys, Mark Andrews broke his ankle, Kenyon Drake, that's also the video they show of him breaking his ankle. And I don't want to sit back and sound callous and be like, sorry, it happened. But at the same time, I go, it's football. Like, it's one of these things where, like, I don't care at what level you play, whether it's Pee-wee all the way up to the NFL, people are going to get hurt. Like,
it's a contact sport.
Yes, it's going to happen. Like, and at some point, you are going to go beyond the bridge too far. And it may be this rule. Like, if Derrick Henry runs for 3,000 yards this season, then people will know, hey, we went too far, because now people don't know how to tackle that. Because the scenario that I really see is, it's like where you're running behind the guy. It's like, well, how in the world am I supposed to tackle this dude?
Yeah.
Like, I can't horse collar him. And if I jump on him from behind and grab his waist, that's a hip drop. So, like, I guess I'm going to have to jump and try to like swat his ankles to see if he'll hit his own self and fall over. Like, that's when you're running behind the guy. I don't know
other options.
Yeah,
no other options
except telling him like, hey, can you please stop and come at me from a different angle. That way I can get a little bit better of an angle to tackle you.
It's the meme of the Rock, and he's just like standing like this, and it's like how the defense is supposed to tackle guys nowadays, and it's like some dude running through the hole, and he just like that's it. If you do this and he falls down, good for you. Otherwise, I guess it's a touchdown.
Yeah,
'Cause-
so I think it will have major implications upon the season that will play out, that especially in the point that you said, there's going to be some flags that people are just like, dude, like, you kidding me? Like, we're keeping drives going from this,
Because back to my original point, like I watched the video that they showed at like when they announced, hey, this is the thing, and they like showed all the owners and the Players Association the video. There were a few that you were like, yeah, okay, that looked dangerous. But then there were a lot that you were just like, that looked like a tackle. Like that just looked like a good form tackle to me. You know what I mean? Like, because again, it's like, why do we have helmets? Like, if you can't hit the guy in the head, and I get what they did, right? Like they're trying to prevent that like launching, but they've taken it so far that like if helmets collide at all, they're like flag. It's like, well, why do you even have the helmet? The whole point of the helmet is because like you knew they were going to contact, and you're protecting them from that. But now, like, how are you? When you tackle someone, like the definition of a tackle is that you like wrap them up and you both fall down to the ground together. And like they've made that illegal.
Yeah. Oh, I get it. There's no argument with me. It's sad because I sit back and I look at all these guys, like I think of James Harrison, Ray Lewis, Ed Reed, like just Rodney Harrison. I'm like, dude, Ronnie Lott, like Hall of Fame guys that you sit back and you're like put on a mantle for defense. It's like Lawrence Taylor. All of these dudes would have left the field in handcuffs. Like they would have been fined out of their entire. They would been. You're suspended for the whole year because you can't stop tackling like this. And it's like, well, how am I supposed to play this game if I can't hit anybody? And it gets even better from the position of quarter. That's sort of the thing I talked about last year. And it's not. This is not anti-Chief hate. It's more just like he does it, and I sit back and I'm go, a lot of quarterbacks before him would have loved to have had that sort of, I guess, privilege of sort of knowing that like it's really apropos to hit me, but Mahomes will just run and you're like, you're waiting. Like I've seen it before, like you saw it in games like James Harris. I still remember him hitting Colt McCoy. You're like, I think Colt's dead.
Yeah,
like
he's dead. He killed a guy.
I mean, even the announcers were just like, I mean, it was legal, but it wasn't really. Like, oh no, we should have hit him that hard, James. Like, but now, like, I remember Mahomes was running through the Dolphins, and like guys were just sort of like handsy with him because it's like, and I get it's like, dude, have you been fined $30,000 or something? Which I know that we sit back and we talk about like, oh well, these guys are making $50 million. Not everyone on the defense is. Like some guys, like you find them $50,000, that was their game check. Like that's what they got paid for that whole game because they hit this guy wrong. Like I sit back and look at that and I go, dude, the game's changing, and for the position of quarterback, it couldn't get any better.
Yeah.
Like,
no, you're right. I mean, he'll do that. He'll get to the sideline and he'll always take like a few extra steps because he knows like I'm gonna get a few more yards because that guy's not gonna hit me. And even if he does and prevents me from getting that first down, the hit is gonna be an automatic 15 anyway. So he does. He absolutely uses it to his advantage, which again, you can't blame him for that. It's just the game is just so different. And I always laugh at it from like the reason they say they do these things is for like players' safety, right? But meanwhile, MetLife is out there taking dudes out more than any hip drop tackle ever has, and they're just like, nah, the turf's fine. You know what I mean? Like, it's we all know it's BS.
100%. I mean, the grass thing is a perfect. It's follow the money. Like you want the answer to anything, follow the money. It's like, what do NFL owners want? They want more points. They want high octane games because that's what keeps fans entertained and
draws the fans in.
That's what makes fans like it. Why do they not want grass fields? Because this turf field I paid one price for and it's done. Like all I have to pay for is people to install it and rip it up, tear it up. Like it's set. Like I don't have to grow it, water it, sunlight, anything. And teams are now, I heard the Kelsey brothers talk about it on their podcast. It's like NFL owners will be like, well, our field doesn't move out of the stadium. And they're like, you're $1 billion owner. You can buy lights for inside the stadium to grow the grass. Like it's not, there's people growing weed all over this country in bunches and warehouses, like illegally. And you're a $1 billion NFL team and you can't figure out how to grow grass. Like, I'm sorry, dog. Like, that's an illogical argument. Like, you're just never going to get me on that. That this is it's not cost effective for the NFL. No, it's owners not wanting to spend money. Like, that's what it comes down to. You look at what's happened with the Chiefs right now. Like, I saw the Chiefs are threatening to move out of Kansas City because they're wanting to do some upgrades, but they're not.
Well, they got destroyed on their little report card.
Oh, and then the owner came out and he goes, "It was just a misinterpretation because I never promised a new locker room." Which so here's my thing. I think this is we're in this like seismic shift of. I look forward to it because we're going to talk about the NIL in a future college episode. I think that this is sort of like what happens when guys from this era, they've gone to all these main colleges where it's like everything was the best of the best. Like I've walked through Alabama.
State
it's
of
like
the art, yeah.
Yeah. You want a smoothie? We got 15 different types only for football players. You want a weight room? It's like there's never not an open rack. Like they had more, you had more benches than you had football players on the team. Like it was crazy. They got 4 practice fields, this huge stadium, brand new locker room, everything that you can possibly imagine. Then you get to the pros, and I always laugh every time I'm up in Cincinnati on a layover because they're the only team without an indoor practice facility. They have a bubble, but that's it. Like they don't have like a team headquarters, and people are just like, "Oh, the Bengals, like they're just cheap," and I'm like, "Yeah, it's a business." Like in college is changing because I think that's going to be the ramification of like paying players as colleges are like, if I got to pay you, then I'm not making all this stuff nice. Like you want a personal trainer, you're getting paid, go find one. Like you can't afford everything. Now, I think that billionaire owners can afford a little bit more. They're just in a position where it's like no one's stepping on them to be like, hey, do better. Because they got guys under contract. So I don't know. That's a whole different rant of.
No, I mean I feel you. When we did that flyover for the Bears game, we got to like go down in the depths of the stadium, and I remember like you're underneath there and you're just like, this is how I die. Like this, give me some bubble gum so I can hold the stadium up here because
Soldier Field's nasty.
Yeah.
The only field worse than that's FedEx Field. I remember one time I was going to go up and see a buddy in DC, and I was like, hey, you want to watch a Commanders game? And he's like, I'm going to do you a favor and just say, watch it on TV because he's like, something will happen to you. He's like, you're not even on the field. He's like, it's taken Alex Smith and Joe Theismann and half these other players. He's like, it will kill you at some point. He's like, that stadium should have been abolished decades ago. He's like, it's sad, but it's true. Like, it's weird. I went and did a walk through the Raiders stadium when I was out in Vegas, and don't get me wrong, stadium's immaculate. Like, I was sort of jealous because walking throughout the whole stadium, Super Bowl was just there, and I was like, dude, there was not a bad seat in this place. Like, wherever you're at, it's great. But at the same time, I sit back and I go, for half the people, it's like you can't afford to get into the game. Like,
yeah.
I sit back and look at NFL games now. I was looking at just a few in the future, and it's like you want good seats. You want to sit there and get the same view that you get at home. Like, it's going to be from $500 to $1,000 a ticket. And I'm like, is this that's what I would expect to sort of pay for a Super Bowl. Maybe I'm just like poor. But then you look at Super Bowl price and you're like, then ticket to get in, it's like 10 grand. I told my wife the other day, I was like, I guess I'm never going because I just can't ever see myself just being like, $10,000. Let's go to a Super Bowl.
One football game.
Yeah. It's not a car anymore. It used to be. But all right, well, you got anything else for the NFC South?
That's it.
All right, well, thanks guys for tuning in. Go follow us on TikTok, Instagram, podcast, YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Thanks for tuning in. Tom Polchaks. See you next time.
Peace.